Welcome to Tourism Talk. I'm your host, Mary Hammond, Director of the Paducah McCracken County Convention and Visitors Bureau. My guest today is Frank Bennett. He is the Director and CEO of the National Quilt Museum of the United States. I love that title.
Thanks for having me on the show.
We're glad to have you, Frank. Glad to have you in Paducah.
Thank you very much. Been here about a year and a half now.
Year and a half. And tell us a little bit about yourselves before we get to talking.
Sure. Well, before I took this on, I was a marketing consultant. I worked out of Dallas, Texas. I've actually lived there for a couple years, and I worked with smaller businesses and helped them with their branding and messaging. The way I learned about Paducah and learned about the National Quilt Museum is about 5 years ago, I was contracted to write a marketing plan for them. And that was the way I found out Paducah even existed at all. In fact, I must admit, I didn't even know this was before we had our own airport, which is great. And I didn't even know quite how I was going to get here at that time.
Well,
but I'm glad I came. And yeah, I did that. And then I was on the board of directors of the museum
Sure.
for about 3.5 years. And when May-Louise Zumwalt, the previous director, stepped down, I saw a great opportunity there with a fantastic facility, and I took it.
I'm glad that you see the possibilities here. We're thankful that May-Louise pursued this, getting from Congress the designation of the National Quilt Museum of the United States. We just call it the National Quilt Museum. But and then once you receive something like that, it's like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do next? What's the next step? But we're lucky that we have a world-class attraction, an anchor attraction for our community, open 7 days a week, most of the year, except in the dead of the winter.
Yep.
And bringing, and as I always say, international visitors from just from around the world on a daily basis.
It truly is. I mean, in an average year, we have visitors not only from the 50 states in the United States, but literally from over 40 countries in every continent around the world. We really do see people on a regular basis who traveled 10,000 miles, you know, just to come to Paducah.
Sure.
And experience the museum and also experience Paducah.
It's always amazes me to be somewhere and have someone say, Paducah is on my bucket list.
It's great.
And they are quilters with a passion, but that's not really. You've got your quilters with a passion that are coming to this museum, 30,000 square feet. You know, with a permanent collection that is just like none other.
I agree.
The largest quilt museum ever.
Yeah.
A wonderful private collection. Then you've also got exhibits that are changing, you know, bringing in the antique quilts, bringing in competitive quilts, bringing in special collections that you all have put together to make this a world-class museum. And the quilters love that. But then you've got that other group of people that are the cultural tourists.
Yep. And I love the cultural tourists because a lot of times within the cultural tourists, you know, these are the folks who go to art museums around the country, where as they travel, whether they're on vacation or just on a weekend trip, they're going to find local art museums and such. And as you know, we've been compared to some of the more nationally known art museums around the country. It's basically just a national art museum. But what I love about the cultural tourists is a lot of times one of them, you know, most often is the wife, but sometimes it's the husband, really has this on their bucket list and made this trip work, and the other one's just along for the ride until they actually get into the museum and experience it. And one of the jokes of it is sometimes that's the person who stays longest.
Oh, that is funny.
Yeah.
In marketing Paducah, what we do, and we've done very much cooperative advertising, and I love it because we've been able to expand into national magazines, national quilting magazines, national cultural magazines, and even recently participated in a magazine that was in 3 languages.
Yep, that was great.
That was really exciting. When we did the conversion study, which was just released to my board, I was surprised at how much international input there was in the conversion study of those who had come, and they do stay longer.
Yep.
They spend more money, they've saved to come here. But the cultural visitor, I would like to be there sometime listening to what a quilter is looking at as they look at the quilts and what a cultural visitor who's looking at it as a piece of art. And the differences, but then maybe there's more overlap than we know.
It really is an entirely different experience. It's an entirely different language. I'm glad you brought that up, because for quilters who come, obviously what we have is the best of the best. It's the best quilts of all different types that you're going to see anywhere. So for the folks who attempt to quilt and are active quilters, which is millions of people, I think there's about 21 million active quilters just in this country alone. It's very, very vibrant. Actually, economically speaking, it's about a $3.5 billion a year industry, so it's very, very vibrant. But for them, they're just in awe because they've done it. And so they have appreciation at the level that these folks are doing. It's very similar to when someone who golfs goes to see the national championships, goes to Augusta for that event, where they're just in awe that people can do it at this level. For the cultural tourist, which just appreciate the art, it's a different experience, because for many of them, they really had no idea that this could be done with fabric. Where they see a lot of the quilts, they're some of the more well-known ones, and they just said, yeah, I can't even conceive. Some person said to me a couple weeks ago, I didn't even know how I would paint that, much less do it in fabric, and that's kind of the result you get.
Well, and we feel that way if we go, say, to Yeiser Art Center and they have an exhibit.
Yes.
They had their permanent collection out recently, and there was a piece from their basket exhibit that they had. Oh, whoever thought that's a basket? You know,
That's a great
or
exhibit.
those sculptures. You're looking at the sculpture. Whatever made them think to use those materials to make a sculpture? And it translates into fiber art as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things I do, I think you've seen me speak a few times, which will throw some people off that have never had the experience of the museum, is I'll take 5 or 10 quilts and put them on PowerPoint slides. And I'll show them up on a PowerPoint and ask people, what is it made out of? And a lot of people can't even conceive that there actually are quilts. They'll guess that it was a painting or what have you. And it gives you an idea. People just can't conceive of what can be done with fabric.
As a sidebar, if you're watching this and you haven't seen the wooden quilt at the Quilt Museum, make sure to go into the conference room and see it. You'll come out going, there's no wooden quilt in here. I don't see any quilt. There's that one hanging on the wall, that folksy kind of quilt, but it is truly wood.
Well, what's interesting about that is people really will go into the conference room, spend a few minutes, and then walk back out in the lobby and say, I didn't see it.
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about. We actually had, I had someone last week who everyone else in the room had finally figured it out, and she was still staring, and she didn't get what was going on, because you can't even conceive that this is actually made of wood.
Oh, the way it hangs, the detail on it. Is it balsa, the real light wood?
Yeah, it's basswood.
Basswood.
Yeah, it's basswood.
Basswood,
Yep.
I'm thinking balsa.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal piece.
And the gentleman that does that is still making those quilts?
Yeah, he actually makes a lot of different things out of, he loves to make things that normally would not be wood out of wood. He had an exhibit at the museum about 3 years ago, and to give you guys an idea, one of the things he hung up on the wall was a leather jacket that was on a real hanger that was completely made out of wood. So if you saw it outside of context, you just think someone's jacket's up there. But the whole thing is wood. He's so talented.
Whatever inspired him to do those things? We'll never know.
No.
I wish I'd asked him that question. Well,
yeah, Fraser Smith is his name.
Fraser Smith, that's right. He has blonde hair, kind of surfer boy looking.
Yeah, it really is, but just
doesn't
phenomenal
look like
genius.
He'd be carving quilts.
Yep.
I guess I'm kind of stuck on this, the cultural visitor and the quilter. And I think your brochure really shows that when you have these quotes. I mean, from Forbes magazine, the museum is a massive tourist attraction. Or the newspaper, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. It's not that different than going to the art museum in Chicago. It's also unexpected. And it is, which is one reason why we advertise in the Chicago Art Institute magazine, the Getty Museum.
It's great.
Smithsonian, some of the different magazines, Architectural Digest. Now, these aren't always the national issues, but they're, as you know from our work together, that for the cultural visitor, Chicago, St. Louis, Nashville are still our major markets that produce the best. Kentucky's right in there, and of course those surrounding states, but the people with the passion for a museum in our region of a cultural visitor come from those areas. But the quilters come from everywhere.
Everywhere around the world.
Everywhere.
Yep.
This time of year when people are thinking about Quilt Show, because they have to plan far ahead, amazing where the calls are coming from for the Quilt Show. but getting ahead of myself here. In that conversion study that we did of only people who answered our ads in quilting publications that were the cooperative advertising the National Quilt Museum did with the Convention Visitors Bureau, you still get quite a few people who come to Quilt Show only because they're doing that different experience.
Yep.
But the other half are people who come the rest of the year. And it really is a balance. We're still, the amount of people who come for Quilt Week, you're there or expanded past that of people who visit the Quilt Museum. It's
true. Yeah, the museum's real busy from about March 1st to about October 31st, and it really doesn't stop that whole time. I tell people all the time that, sure, Quilt Week is a busy week for the museum, but it's only about 15% of our total business for the year. We basically have people coming from around the country and around the world, like you said, with the quilters, to Paducah to experience the museum every day, all year round.
When they come to Paducah and they are a quilter, they're looking for, not during Quilt Show, not Quilt Week, the rest of the year, they are looking for that experience and they're looking for it in depth. And they will find the businesses and go there. And those businesses are very quietly out there doing well. Hancock's, oh, my friends in Australia, they are online looking at Hancock's all the time. They know when something goes on sale. They know when there's free shipping days. And they really take advantage of that. But as an example, when those folks come to Paducah, they come every other year, and they stay in the States for 3 weeks. They usually spend a week to 10 days of that in Paducah. Hub and spoke, yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
staying here and going out of Paducah on a daily basis, if it be to go to a quilt shop, if it go to meet somebody that they met through quilting. They may have met them on a social media, but they've gotten a relationship and they visit with them. They spend a huge amount of time at the Quilt Museum, more than one visit, and scheduled during your workshops.
Yeah, definitely, that's all true. It's a whole experience because these are travelers, the quilters, where they've spent a lot of money just to get here. You know, if you come from, really obviously you've come internationally, but if you come from the West, between you got a flight, you got into Paducah, you got a rental car, hotels, food. This really is a whole experience for them, where they're going to go to places like Hancock's and Quilt in the Day, and they're obviously going to go to a number of our restaurants, and they're also going to go to our other cultural attractions while they're here. So they turn this into an overall experience, and you're right. We do have people come all year long to go to our workshops. We have this year 6 workshops, which are being done by some of the most known quilters in the country. And we really do have people come from everywhere to experience that unique thing of taking one of those workshops.
In the 70s, there was the real rebirth of quilting. But we're seeing now that people who were caught up in the 70s and have come on board, now there's another group of younger quilters that are out there that are making their mark on the fiber art. Maybe they're not just called quilters. They're artists. They consider themselves artists.
They are artists.
And you'll have some of these type folks coming or exhibits like this?
Yes, well, we definitely mix that in. The mission of the museum is to honor today's quilter. And a lot of what's happening in quilting right now is there's a younger wave that's occurring. It's exciting. There's a guild now, the Modern Quilt Guild, that has thousands of members. They're having their first big show in Austin, Texas. It's actually just in a couple weeks. It's called QuiltCon. And they really have a unique thing going on, and they really have a new voice where I'm excited to see where that's going to go. You mentioned one of the more known quilters from the Modern Quilt Guild, Denise Schmidt, is coming here and doing a workshop later on in the year, which has already had a buzz, like a lot of people want to take it. But what's unique about the younger quilters in that sect is that they don't consider there to be any rules, where they really consider themselves artists, to where it's just like if you were a painter and you had a blank canvas. They consider what they're doing a blank canvas, and they can express themselves in which way they want. And it's very diverse work. You
still see the traditional designs, and you see them warped into
yes,
something new.
That's a good way to put it.
But then you also see things like, oh gosh, the Lord of the Rings quilt, where you might before have seen animals. Now you're seeing fantasy quilts.
Yep.
You're so much different interpretation and so many different materials. I've never seen so many sparklies in my life as on a couple of the quilts that are really using the Australian crystals.
Yep.
I think this is outside of just, it's in the art world, period.
Yes, it
Look
is.
at Kristen Williams opening a shop, gallery, studio, classroom in Lowertown where Emfera, is that the name of her shop?
Yeah, and Farah, I believe, yes.
Emfera, which means taking lots of different pieces and making something from it. And it's a craft, but quilters are doing that as well now.
Very much so.
And you see it when you, not just the fabrics, they're not just regular, go to the fiber store and find, it's the old feed sacks, it's the reuse, being green.
Yeah, I'll give you an extreme example. You remember we had an exhibit about 4 or 5 months ago, quilts from the United Kingdom, and in that exhibit there was a quilt completely made of paper. Yeah, where they actually had had sewn together clips from newspapers into a quilt.
Wow.
Yeah, so really it's just like any art form. There's some stuff coming out now that really challenges traditional boundaries, and there's definitely a place for that. It expands your idea of what can be done.
There was a time where things were only straight edged or maybe sawtoothed edge. Those days are gone.
Yes.
They may not even be, they may be juxtaposed.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, a good example was I had someone ask me the other day who hadn't been there about how we hang things and, you know, what's considered a quilt and what isn't and stuff. And I said, you know, the thing is, we actually have exhibits of quilts that aren't even square and don't even go on a wall. You know, we have the Priscilla Sage exhibit a couple months ago. Those hang from the ceiling. There's as long as it's 3 layers and, you know, it's made of fabric, it's within the genre of quilting. It doesn't even necessarily have to be square or circle or anything.
I would have called that cloth origami.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Weren't those great?
Or wind chimes out of cloth, or 3 layers of cloth. Yeah, it was totally blown away by that.
Yep.
It has taken on a whole different
Her work is astounding. It's amazing.
It is.
Yep. And then we had about 8, 9 months ago, we had the fusing exhibit with which is, you know, a different form, a lot of color, a lot of splices, and that had a number of pieces in it too that were definitely wouldn't go on a wall, would actually just sit. Like there was one of it was 6 people playing bingo at a table, but it's made out of fabric and it's made out of layers, and you know, it fits into the genre. There's a place for that.
Why in my mind am I picturing that famous painting of the dogs playing poker?
Yeah, yeah. They weren't dogs, but I guess you could do that too.
I don't know why that came to my mind.
Yep.
But, well, so what do you see the future? How do you see the Quilt Museum going? In what direction?
Well, we really have a phenomenal potential for growth. In the 18 months or so that I've been here, we've grown about 9% as far as visitors. And between the cultural tourist niche, which we just talked about, and the quilters all over the world, you know, this really is a mecca for quilters, and we just see it continuing to grow. And I mean, it's the largest it's the largest tourist attraction in Paducah now, but there's really no reason we can't be twice as big as we are. It just has phenomenal potential for growth because people come here from everywhere. It's a true destination.
It is. Quilt Show helped put us on the map.
Yes,
because
it did.
Is the big pow. I
Yep.
mean, it is the big explosion all in one week, very condensed. But as a community, we need to realize that this is the sustainable, day in, day out attraction that is here, bringing people, and to be a part of it, communicate with you. There are a lot of people coming through those doors.
Yep, every single day. It really more people come to Paducah on a day in, day out.
Right.
Day in, day out to come see the museum than for anything else. And these are people experiencing Paducah, and they're all over the world. I was actually talking to David Denton the other day, the local attorney. He and his wife had gone through Europe, and they ran into 2 separate people who, as soon as they said we're from Paducah, they said, yeah, we know Paducah because we've been to the Quilt Museum.
Quilt Museum.
Yeah.
We love that the steamboats are coming back to Paducah.
Yes, yes.
These are world travelers. This is one portion of the travel that these folks do. You don't see many that this is their only trip. Most of those folks are repeat visitors. They've been to Paducah. They continue. They talk about us. You know, that brag factor. Everybody likes the brag factor. They've done something that somebody else hasn't, and they're very good ambassadors for us. There is always that confusion with the American Quilter Society and the National Quilt Museum. There are common denominators, Meredith and Bill Schrader. That's about it.
Yeah,
and quilts.
And quilts. I guess that's really the denominator. Yeah, the American Quilter Society obviously puts on the Quilt Show. And the Quilt Show obviously is phenomenal for the economy. It's a phenomenal event and has gone on for a long time, will go on for a long time. And, but yeah, they put the initial $2 million up to fund the building of the National Quilt Museum. But beyond that, though, as we function today, we're a completely separate organization. As I like to say sometimes in speeches, we're as separate as Google and Apple. We really are. We're a 501c3 nonprofit. We are funded off of the generosity of people who come to the museum. That's completely how we're funded. We're not funded by AQS or anything. We're just completely separate organizations. But I think since we're both involved with quilting, that sometimes people will lump us all together.
Very much so. But you have a space at the Quilt Show, a booth space, and you do an activity there. You do a big auction.
Yep.
Silent auction.
Great event.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, AQS is a great strategic partner for us. They're a great strategic partner, that they help us. We try to help them as much as we can. We believe in what they're doing, and I love the show. The show's great. They've been generous enough to help us to put on both a live and a silent auction every quilt show, where all of the funds from it go to help the museum, and that's very helpful. That's actually, in many years, our biggest fundraising event. So it's a great event.
The big winners, the big three winners.
Yep.
The hand stitch quilt, the machine stitch quilt, the best of show. Is there now a long arm?
There's actually four. There's a long arm, or five, I'm sorry. A long arm, and then there's a miniature.
A miniature.
Yeah.
So the winners of these, they're very, very nice cash prizes.
Yes.
And most do take that,
Yes.
and then those quilts are donated to the Quilt Museum?
Yeah, yes. The way it works, Mary, is obviously the pinnacle of the event at the Quilt Show is the contest, because such phenomenal quilts at it. But whoever wins in those categories, there's a cash prize. The winner of the whole thing wins $20,000 this year. If you take the money, you have two options. You can actually choose to keep your quilt and not take the money, and a few people have. But for the most part, people will take the money, and then when that happens, the Quilt Museum gets the quilt, and it becomes part of our collection. And when you go into the museum, as you first come in the doors, the first three quilts that you see are the winners from last year. We usually make it so that the first ones are always the winner from the previous year.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you walk in the door and see those three big winners, and then to the side the miniature quilts, which to me are just, I mean, I can't even see that small, but they truly are about this big.
Yep.
And some of them are even copies by the same artist, quilter, made small, and I cannot believe how small the pieces are.
Yeah, the miniatures are absolutely amazing. You mentioned earlier the difference between the cultural tourists and the quilters. Right. Well, the quilters really get lost in the miniatures because they understand how hard that is. A good example is every year George Siciliano comes here and does an event or two. He probably weighs 250 pounds. He's 6'6". He looks like a linebacker, and he makes these quilts that are no more than 24 inches by 24 inches. They're like you said, smaller than some people can see. You can't even imagine his hands can do that.
If you think you've been to the Quilt Museum, it is constantly changing exhibits.
Yep.
Always, just like an art gallery. And these quilts rest in the vault. They're very well taken care of, so that they'll be preserved. But you want to go there to see the different exhibits. And I'm looking here at the schedule of things that are coming up. Judy Martin's quilts. Who's Judy Martin?
Judy Martin's up right now, and Judy Martin's quilts are great. First of all, I'm excited about the entire schedule this year.
Oh, I'm just looking over this. Just quilt quickly. Yeah,
we have such a diverse group, from stuff that really is art quilting at its finest, like Carol Fowler has an exhibit later on this year, to stuff that's more traditional. We have a Civil War exhibit this year,
Very
which
cool.
is some historical quilts that are relevant to the Civil War. It's really a phenomenal list or schedule of exhibits. Judy Martin's quilts are unique takes on traditional quilting, where she does use a lot of log cabins, and she does use a lot of things you've seen for decades, but she does them with a unique bend, if you will, that no one else does. I love her work. It's up right now. Her color play between colors is something that's very, very unique. You should definitely check it out.
And that is something else, that the days of looking at the antique quilts that are of the, I don't mean to say dull, but many of them are more earthen colors or the softer colors. Now the colors, people are hand dyeing their fabrics.
Yes.
They're looking for the most unusual patterns and fabrics from far and wide to put them together. And I love that. Well, I'm just going to run over, because we just have a few minutes here.
Okay.
Quilts of the South Central U.S. School Block Challenge, which amazed me.
It's great.
Antique Jacob's Ladders quilts. Boy, that's a tongue twister.
Yep.
New quilts from an old favorite, Jacob's Ladder. Alexandra and Loeb.
That's an exhibit of, it's very unique. They're definitely art quilts. It's unlike anything anyone else is doing. It's very, very different from anything traditional, I'll put it to you that way. Looking forward to that exhibit. There's also an exhibit in there, which the next one you were going to say, I think, is 11th Quilts Japan.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, which is an exhibit from Japan, which what they're doing is different from what anyone is doing. I'm looking forward to that exhibit.
We've done a lot of exchange with Japan, and I look forward to more. I challenge you who are watching this to come down to the Quilt Museum, and when you go in there, be sure, tell Sherry, because she'll be there at the front desk. You say, you tell Frank, I saw that show and I came down here to see these quilts. And look for Ruby, my mom, she's a docent in there.
Yes, she is.
And she'll tell you some of the stories behind the quilts, because that is what really makes them personal. Why they did that, why they chose to do what they did. The artists, the quilters, are expressing themselves in every piece you see.
Definitely, definitely. It's like I tell people all the time, if you've never been there, that we're so sure that you'll be blown away by it, that if you don't like it, we'll give you your money back. We've never actually given anyone their money back.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
What a way to end.
Thank
you, Frank. We will continue this, and as we talk about your future plans and activities to come.
Sure.
I'm excited to have you here in Paducah.
Thank you. Appreciate the interview.
See you next time on Tourism Talk.
1, 2, 1, 2, go. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba.